FEMA Administrator Chris Wells said today that she acknowledged concerns that Florida, as was said, lacks response to the storm so far, and that
Whoa. Give me a break. That is nonsense. Stop politicizing, okay? Stop it. We declared a state of emergency when this thing wasn't even formed. We've had people in here. You've had counties doing, they've done a lot of hard work. And honestly, you're trying to attack me, I get, but like you're attacking these other people who've worked very hard. And so that's just totally false. I don't think we've ever, certainly since I've been governor, declared a state of emergency this early. We made sure that we were very inclusive with it. We said that there was a lot of uncertainty, and then we've worked to make sure the preparations that have been done and all this stuff, you talk to the people at the counties when they've needed something, stuff gets there very quickly because of what Kevin and his team have done.
I'll tell you one thing. Love him or hate him, you've got to love DeSantis. Good evening, people. This is now day 2 of Hurricane Ian. It's making landfall up north, and we're keeping up with the news. It's going up the west coast in the Gulf and making landing in the mainland near Tallahassee, I want to say. And it's pretty serious, but my goodness. The politicizing of this hurricane, I guess everything is political and politics ruins everything. I'm wearing the wrong shirt tonight. I actually wanted to start off with this video of DeSantis to show what it's like when someone can deliver a message with a plan in a manner that is convincing, reassuring in times of crises. This is
a major storm.
He talks slowly. He's not manic and frantic, fumbling his words. And yes, I'm making self-deprecating jokes here. Listen to this.
Something that we knew was going to be significant. That the strengthening of this over the last night, has been really significant. It's potentially that it could make landfall as a Category 5, but clearly this is a very powerful major hurricane that's going to have major impacts, both on impact in Southwest Florida, but then as it continues to work through the state, it is going to have major impacts.
Identifying a problem.
In terms of rain, in terms of flooding. So this is going to be
setting expectations.
Nasty day, 2 days. Probably we think now it will be exiting the peninsula sometime on Thursday. Yesterday, based on how fast it was moving, thought maybe it wouldn't be till the wee hours of Friday morning. So this is going to be a rough stretch. We're here to respond to the areas that are affected once the storm is passed. Local emergency responders are standing by, ready to go. I think most people heeded the warnings of doing the evacuations in those very sensitive locations, but not everyone may have done that. And so we understand that a storm of this magnitude, there's going to be a need, to begin those rescue efforts apace.
It is reassuring. Identifying a problem, setting out the solutions, and also setting out the expectations. Now, we'll see what's going on following it. There's live footage, and my goodness, it's interesting. It's interesting to watch this from the perspective of being in Florida, first hurricane I've ever lived through. The idea that people have to pack up their homes, board up their windows, and evacuate, and hope that they come back to something. It's an eye-opening experience. Now, with that said, people, everyone's wishing the best, and we'll see how it turns out in Florida. Tonight is going to be an amazing one. You may know our guest for tonight, Robert Kiyosaki. You may know him best as the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But I've been doing my homework, and I've been listening to interviews. There's much more depth. Maybe I just didn't know it because I'm, a bit of a boob myself, but there's much more depth to Robert, and it's going to be a fascinating and phenomenal discussion. I see everyone's in the backdrop, in the backstage, so I'll bring in Robert first. Robert Barnes, who's in the house. Robert, how you doing, sir?
Good.
And now I'm going to bring in Robert Kiyosaki. I'm going to bring you in here, and I'm going to put myself on the bottom. Robert, how are you doing?
How you doing, Mr. Barnes?
How are you?
Good, really good. Thanks. I love this, so thank you.
Thank you. It's phenomenal. I've been spending the better part of the day, learning about you, watching some interviews. Robert, I mean, everyone watching is going to know you, I guess, first and foremost from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is phenomenal. Everybody should read it. I got a bit of a head start because my dad, way back when, gave me the exact same lessons, Robert, the difference between assets and liabilities. But for anybody who doesn't know who you are, give us the 30,000 foot overview before we get into it.
Well, let me adjust my little camera here. So, well, anyway, thank you. It's an honor to be anything to do with Mr. Barnes here. My opening question would be, how are we doing on the second Civil War? Do you know what I mean? I think this time you and I we are fighting for our freedoms.
Yes.
And we're fighting for our freedom from the Marxist academic left. And so my background kind of begins with this whole battle is that in 1965, I graduated from high school from Hilo, Hawaii. Not a very smart kid, but I got nominations to Naval Academy, U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And I took the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy and in Kings Point, New York. And in 1965, my economics teacher had me read Karl Marx. He had me read the Communist Manifesto, quotes from Stalin, Lenin, and Mao and Hitler. And so I was 18 years old. I'm going, holy mackerel. Most of my family are Marxists, but they don't know it. So here we are, Mr. Barnes. We're fighting for the second Civil War. This time we're fighting for our freedom from being enslaved by Marxist academic left. And that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad started in 1997, because the way you fight communism is with capitalism, financial education. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a very basic primer on financial education. And as you know, every time I ask audiences, what does school teach you about money? They go, nothing. And we wonder why we have this growing gap between rich and poor. So we don't solve the gap by printing money, as you know. It only makes the gap worse. And today, we're in an emergency. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they're kicking our asses. And the war in the Ukraine is not really the Ukraine, it's Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, because in 1974, we were a petrodollar country. But then as soon as we left Afghanistan, thanks to Biden, Saudi Arabia joined forces with China. So we're screwed right now. And then the academic left inside America, when I read the Communist Manifesto, Marx says communism would come to America in two stages. So stage one happened in 1930 when the Berlin School sent teachers to Columbia University, Teachers College. And as you may remember, that's when the rioting in Columbia started and all this. And the rioting spread all across America to Kent State, where we killed 4 kids. So I go to Vietnam as a Marine helicopter pilot, went down 3 times. And what did I get when I came back? I got spit on, hit with eggs by those UC Berkeley kids. So back in 1972, I saw Marxist Communist manifestos coming in place. And then as you work on in 2020, when my friend Donald Trump, he and I wrote 2 books together, when he lost the election, stage 2 of Marxist prediction had come true. So that's basically who I am. I'm still a Marine helicopter pilot, not the brightest mind, not the brightest match in a box, but I like to fight.
What's extraordinary is, we talked about it at some conferences that we were both at. The extraordinary massive spending that the West went on during the pandemic, just printing. We saw today the UK has all kinds of problems. They're trying to bail out pension funds. They're trying to bail out their currency, all the rest. Have you been surprised at how there's been not enough public discussion that printing that amount of money was going to create an inflationary crisis and disproportionately hurt ordinary working people around the West?
It's, well, again, in 1848, when Marx wrote or published, he and Engels published a Communist Manifesto, 1848, everybody should read that book, because you'll see that our colleges and universities are Marxist. Do you know what happened in 1930 when the Frankfurt School sent teachers to to Columbia University, who my friend Dennis Prager calls a communist place anyway. Communism says spreading through academics. And my poor dad was the head of education for the state of Hawaii, PhD. Good man. But he had no idea he had Marxist tendencies. Like he belonged to a labor union. So in 1969, when I graduated from Kings Point, I was being paid about $45,000, $47,000 a year, which is pretty good in 1969 for a 22-year-old kid. But my classmates were making $120,000 a year. So in 1969, for a 22-year-old kid to make $120,000 a year was good money back then. Not much today, but good money back then. And the difference in pay scale was I refused to join the labor union. I just refused. And I'm not against labor unions, but it's a personal coach. As Marx said, workers of the world unite. And today we have the NEA, National Extortion Association, the most powerful, richest union in America. And we wonder why we have communism spreading through our schools. It's tragic. And that's why, I am honored. I thank you for your fight, because we have to fight back. And I fight with financial education. That's all I'm doing.
You served in Vietnam for how many years?
I was 6 years as a Marine, 4 years at the academy, 2 tours in Vietnam.
And that, now in a couple of the interviews I was listening to, that I guess had an impact on you in a number of ways, but one of which was seeing communism, fighting communism, and now what you perceive to be, or what many feel to be, a rise. If it's not communism per se, it's certainly communistic in tendency in America. How did that experience shape you at the time versus retrospectively what you make of that experience now?
Well, people may not know it. Look, again, I said, when Biden took us out of Afghanistan, that was Vietnam all over again. Because that, it was 2020, I believe. And then the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia, joined Russia. So the US was a petrodollar up until then. But the thing I saw, which was sad, is we have to shoot kids. And you shoot a kid, your guts go out. But we had to do it to fight. But the worst thing of all was I would watch Walter Cronkite on CBS Evening News, and he'd be describing battles that I had fought in, like Quang Tri and Wei and all this stuff. We lost so many guys. Some of my friends didn't come back. And what Walter Cronkite, I'm sure, is a good man, but what he reported wasn't the truth. And so that's when I got suspicious. As Stalin said also, is that he talked about the press was essential for them. And as you can see tonight, my friend Donald Trump says fake news. He's not too far off. But I saw it in Vietnam because I was in those battles. But all they show is the atrocities that we did to turn the public against us. What they don't know is the atrocities they did to us. And they never reported that side. And when you lose a friend and all this stuff, it sickens you. So when I came back to the States in 73, January 10th, 1973, and I got hit by eggs and spit on by these hippies from the Woodstock generation, I knew America had changed. So
when you set out to write Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what did you expect the reaction to be? And were you surprised at how extraordinarily popular the book became and remains today?
Mr. Barnes, guess who turned the book down? I got trashed by the editors out of New York. They turned my book down, turned it down, and their comments were, "You don't know what you're talking about." And so finally, I had to self-publish it. And so I printed 1,000 books, and I put it in my friend's gas station in Austin, Texas. And he says, if those books don't, I gave him 12 books. He says, if those books don't sell, you're getting them back. So about 2 weeks later, they were still sitting there, 12 books, And then one day, a book disappeared, and then all the books were gone. I said, what happened? So I called my friend who owned the gas station or this car wash. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to sell anymore. That was too nerve-wracking for me. He says, I don't like inventory. I said, but I wasn't charging for them. But anyway, the people that picked it up were Amway. And I love Amway because they teach people to be capitalists. Knock on doors, take rejection, build a business and all that. That's pure capitalism that the average person, mom and pop, for a little money, just a little sweat equity, can build it. But when Trump and I got together, it was because he and I were the only guys recommending network marketing, because we're both capitalists. And we wrote 2 books together, Why We Want You to Be Rich and Midas Touch. But we endorse network marketing because, to me, that is a low-cost entryway into our world of capitalism. So that was it. I love Amway. I love network marketing. I think we should teach more people to be capitalists, not expect a handout from the government.
Robert, you want to go for something? Well, okay, no, Robert, I'll just do this. So people don't know, who may not know, born in Hawaii, both your parents are Japanese, and your rich dad was Chinese. Which
now we're getting racist here.
Well, no. First of all, I'm reading some of the chat. They said there's a lot of jokes in the chat that came before this. But I guess my question is this: first of all, how many generations American, and what was growing up in Hawaii like? Because I know how you feel about it now, but we need to get to how you feel about it now based on your life experience there.
Well, I think it was a blessing. My aunt came over, I think, on the first boat from Japan. So I'm 4th generation Japanese American. But also what happened in my background is after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese weren't that popular in Hawaii. And what they did, not that I blame them, but they rounded up my family in California and put them in concentration camps. They took all their land, their properties, their businesses. They just took everything from them. But this is what pisses me off about, what is that called? Reparations or something like that they want to do. All it did with my family is their kids were inspired to go fight in World War II. We didn't want to get paid for reparations. We didn't care. I mean, we did care that our family was locked up. So that was when they formed the 442nd Infantry Battalion, all Japanese. And American Japanese, my uncles and aunts, my uncles primarily, wanted to prove we were Americans. And interestingly enough, I had 3 uncles fight in Europe, all the way up from Africa, all the way up north. And then 2 uncles fought against the Japanese in Japan, in the Pacific. But my uncle, on one side, he got a Bronze Star, and there was Senator Daniel Inouye. He was part of that background. And that's how I got my congressional appointments. Daniel Inouye was a friend of the family, but he lost his arm and all that, got a Medal of Honor, I believe. But our family fought back. And one of the first things they did was they liberated one of the concentration camps in Germany. So it was kind of full circle. Their family was still locked up in concentration camps, but they got to liberate on the other side in Europe, the prisoners there. So that's the difference in the spirit of capitalism. I'm a Marine, and we're taught Marines don't start fights, we end them.
Now, how did you get into real estate?
Well, when I came back from Vietnam, my poor dad was a PhD, went to Stanford, Northwestern New York, Chicago, a good man. But as I say, he didn't know he was a Marxist. He didn't like labor unions. He thought, this should pay people not to work and all this stuff. And I asked my rich dad, what should I do? And he says, well, become an entrepreneur. Well, holy mackerel. And then I asked my poor dad, he says, why don't you fly for the airlines? Because I was a pilot already. I said, I've done that. I don't want to do that anymore. So when I said, how to become an entrepreneur, my rich dad said to me, there's 2 things you have to learn. Number 1 is how to sell. And that's why I love network marketing. You have to sell. You have to knock on doors, take rejection. It's called grow up. And the second thing I had to learn was real estate. And I asked my rich dad why. He says, because as you know, in 1913, the Fed was created. Also in 1913, the IRS was created. And Biden just appointed 87,000 new IRS agents. If that isn't Gestapo time, I don't know what it is. But I'll show a copy of my friend's book. Here's my account, Tax-Free Wealth. So what Rich Dad teaches is how to make millions of dollars and pay no taxes legally. When people ask me, aren't you afraid of the IRS? I said, well, sure, everybody is. And I have no plans on dancing the hula for a boyfriend in jail. But American capitalism is still here. So that's when they do the 1619 Project. America was not founded as a slave nation. America was founded in 1773 with the Boston Tea Party. We revolted against Mother England's taxes. And as you know, England just took a tank. Japan's going to go next. Sri Lanka's gone because of the Federal Reserve and IRS.
Robert, I mean, this is the question. Very smart people, many years ago, were saying printing this amount of money is going to be a problem. Raising interest rates is going to cause a recession, and yet, it's going to cause inflation. The inflation is not transitory. There's this concept called fractal wrongness, where every decision that somebody makes at any stage is wrong. And fractal wrongness typically goes beyond randomness. People ultimately conclude it has to be calculated. When you're looking at what's going on now, smart people like you, like the other Robert Barnes, and other economists, they say this is a massive problem. It's going to lead to this. And then it happens and they still do it anyhow, and they continue to do it. What do you make of it? And how do you make sense of it? And then we'll get into how you protect yourself against it. But what do you make of it?
Well, I think one of the most important things is where I first came across Robert Barnes through George Gammon. And then we stand on the stage and put our lives at risk in many ways. But we speak to like-minded human beings. And we need to fight back. I am a Marine, we fight back. But as there was a book called The Alchemist, and it said the trouble with people is they believe what they want to hear. So if you tell them that hard work is the way, you're about as popular as fleas in the bed. But if you tell I'll give you free money, you're a popular dude, man. I'll vote for you. And now we're screwed.
What was it like, given his reputation as being constantly attacked by the institutional media? What was it like to work with Donald Trump?
It's one of the greatest experiences of my life, because I met he was coming. I knew him as the Donald, because we were real estate guys. We traveled the world talking to mass real estate audiences, and then around 2015, I do a Rich Dad Radio podcast, and he and I were supposed to write our third book together. And on Rich Dad Radio, he announces, says, Robert, we can't do the third book because I'm going to run for president. And I said, good luck, my friend. And I'll just say this much about him. There's no two Donald Trumps. And the other thing too, his sons, Don Jr. and Eric, they're great young men. I'm a hunter. Those boys are hunters. Donald's a golfer. We've spent weeks on deserted beaches with no water, no toilets, hunting and fishing, catching cat, what we do. And every place I went with those guys, these two young men would walk in back to whatever restaurant we were in, and they would say hello to the staff. He always said hello to the staff. Now look at Hunter Biden, that criminal. Anyway, but I won't get into that. But one time, this is where Donald's character comes in. I think I was in San Francisco at Moscone. We had 65,000 in the audience, and I used Leona Helmsley's term, little people. Trump came up on stage in front of 65,000 people, tapped me on the shoulder, and he says, never use that term again. It's disrespectful. So those are my personal experiences of Donald plus his two sons. And they're fine young men as compared to that criminal Hunter, who they can't seem to find his computer for some reason.
Robert, I don't want to put the juju out in the universe, but have you had any problems with I don't know, intelligence agencies or Department of Justice coming after you, that they've been going after a lot of Trump's allies? Have you had any run-ins?
Yeah, not only that, I get taken down from YouTube and all that. You know, Don Jr. and Eric and I were doing a podcast. They took it down. You know, that's why, Mr. Barnes, I said, this time, this is the second Civil War, and we're fighting for our freedom now.
Exactly. I was amazed when I was in your house, all the different animals that you've hunted over the years. When did you first get into hunting, and what are some of the highlights of your experience? Because it's something that's under cultural attack, that it's somehow now it's a bad thing to do hunting. And one of the things that Don Jr. is also great at doing. But I was amazed at the diversity of animals that you had successfully hunted. When did you first get into that, and what are some of the highlights?
Well, I'm a Marine, you know, and I hate to say this. When I was 16 years old, I was picking pineapples on the island of Molokai because my dad and my rich dad was my best friend's father, who was Chinese. And that's the joke, is poor dad was Japanese and rich dad was Chinese. So I'm accused of being a racist now. But anyway, so I was picking pineapple. I'm 16 years old. And I'm in this little pineapple town in Molokai. And there was no girls. So this one guy shows up, a local guy with a girlfriend with a short skirt on. And so you know how they used to have the old theaters where you walked up into the balcony? So as she's walking up the stairs, all of us are trying to look up her skirt. And the next thing you know, I got a barrel of a gun in my forehead. And he says, "You keep looking and blow your fucking brains out." Robert, it was the biggest rush of my life. I said, I'm going to become a Marine. No, it's the ultimate sport, manhunting, man. It's the ultimate sport. And so that's why I had a choice of joining the Air Force, flying for them, Navy, Coast Guard. This is after I graduated. I was already commissioned. And the Coast Guard gets up there and say, "Our pilot saved lives." And the Marine recruiter stood up there and he says, the Navy guys talked about, you know, the hit carriers. The Air Force talked about the golf courses they build. So then when the Coast Guard guy says, "We save lives," the Marine stood up and he says, "Listen, sweethearts, be really clear on something. Marines travel to faraway places, meet nice people, and we killed them. You want to save people's lives? Join the Coast Guard." So there was only 12 of us out of maybe 600 guys that stood in front of the Marine Corps. And my logic was, if you're going to go to war, go with people who want to kill. Do you know what I mean? I don't want any draft dodgers in my group and all. I mean, they can draft us, freedom of speech. But you're going to go to war, you want to go to war with people who want to fight. And that's why I was always, you know, when George Gavin put us together and all this, Mr. Barnes, it's like, we're here to fight. And so that's why Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 97, created my cash flow board game. We have to teach capitalism at home because our schools are teaching Marxism at school.
Same, Robert. Now you strike me as being a character that was not included in Full Metal Jacket with these anecdotes. Like the character that didn't make the final cut but should have made the final cut. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And by the way, in you know what? We'll do it right now. We're going to go over to Rumble. I'm gonna wind it down here so we can go exclusive to Rumble. And I don't know how much edgier the conversation is going to get, but we'll have that freedom if we so choose. So winding it up here, people. It won't change anything with the Roberts. I'm just going to end on YouTube and see you guys on Rumble.